at 12 minutes past 3 in the afternoon. Sadly, they said a 41-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin have been informed and are being supported by officers. At this time, his death is being treated as unexpected, but is not believed to be suspicious. The case is being investigated by officers from the Met's Central South Command Unit. A file will be prepared for the coroner. Jason Arday's family released a statement this evening saying they're in shock to have lost an amazing father, partner, brother, uncle and son. Their statement continues, the campaign of misinformation was too much for Jason, who was a gentleman and who always wanted to see the best in everyone. Let's bring in our correspondent, Phoebe Southworth. And Phoebe, you can give us the background to all of this because it's been going on for some weeks now.
Absolutely, a devastating end to a case which has been developing and incredibly fast-paced over many weeks now. Jason Arday, as we've talked about, was a professor of sociology of education at Cambridge University. He joined in 2022, and the following year he became Cambridge's youngest black professor. He then resigned over allegations of plagiarism in relation to his PhD thesis, which he wrote at Liverpool John Moores University. No wrongdoing was found in relation to that following an investigation, but that was at the centre of what followed. Durham and Glasgow universities then looked into the circumstances around Professor Arday's appointment to the academic post that he held there. And then following his stepping down from Cambridge University amid this plagiarism row, the allegations around that, an investigation was then launched by Cambridge, not only looking into the circumstances around the hiring of Professor Arday, his time at the university as a professor, but also more broadly the hiring processes. How are senior staff being appointed to one of the top institutions of education in the UK and world-renowned? Dozens of academics had supported that investigation. Well, Professor Arday had resigned from the university and he issued an open resignation letter in which he said he felt that the only option he had was to step away, and the only way that he could bring this chapter to an end was to resign from his post. That, obviously, in the light of what we've now discovered tonight, the shocking news that he has been found dead, takes on a much more sombre and dark undertone. Some are saying that he was the victim of a social media and more broadly a media storm. Not only was his academic tenure at Cambridge and at other universities under scrutiny, but also this was then broadened out by the media and by social media commentators into the truth of other claims that he made about himself. He was said to have run 600 miles in 6 days, raised £5.5 million for charity, and these were some of the claims that then became a part of the scrutiny of him as an individual, so not just his academic career, but also it got quite personal. And then obviously the very tragic news from the Metropolitan Police tonight that he was found dead at a property in southwest London. His family are being supported. Police said his death is not believed to be suspicious, but it was being treated as unexpected, phrasing which has been discussed a lot tonight among some of the guests we've had on Sky News. Could his death have been predicted under the circumstances that he found himself in? Well, Jason Arday's family released a statement this evening. They said they were in shock to have lost this amazing father, partner, brother, uncle and son. They said also the publisher of the book that he was due to publish later this month, Simon & Schuster, they said the campaign of misinformation was too much for Jason, who was a gentleman and who always wanted to see the best in everyone. We also had a statement from Cambridge University from the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Deborah Prentice. She said, "We are desperately saddened to hear this tragic news. Our heartfelt sympathies go to Jason Arday's family and friends at this incredibly difficult time." Well, a number of issues to unpack from this incredibly distressing and concerning case. The human side of the story and how he was caught up in a sort of storm of commentary, and also more broadly the culture wars and how some are saying he was weaponised in that and is being used as a tool by the far right to criticise the hiring of professors and academics at institutions across the UK. And then more broadly, academia, it all leads back to his appointment at Cambridge University, and we'll have to watch in the coming weeks to see how their investigation into Arday evolves.
Phoebe, many thanks indeed. As we heard from Phoebe there are so many elements to this story, but the main thing tonight is it is an absolute tragedy. I want to get the thoughts of both Susie and Kwasi on this. Kwasi first.
Well, look, I think there were two things. I mean, clearly there was a firestorm about some of the claims he made, the academic side in terms of the plagiarism, and there were other claims he'd made that obviously people scrutinised. And I think the death, and we don't know the circumstances, the assumption is that he may have taken his own life, but nobody knows. We don't know what happened. But clearly it's a tragic thing to have occurred. And I think you've got to be able to distinguish between the investigation in terms of the ongoing inquiry. My suspicion is that he was over-promoted for lots of reasons. And then, of course, the backlash when he was scrutinised, I think, was very severe. And you've got to remember, he's not a politician, he's not a public figure, he's not somebody who's ever been in the public spotlight to the extent that he's experienced in the last few weeks. And from people I've known who've had suddenly a flood of spotlight and inquiry into them. I mean, I remember in the Iraq War, Dr. Kelly, I mean, that was another example. People who live, quite shy, retiring off from academic lives, suddenly thrust into public controversy, huge media storm, and actually nowadays with social media, you can see how someone who's sensitive and fragile can respond in this tragic way. If that's the case, we don't know the full facts. But I think it's a great tragedy. But it's separate. You've got to distinguish his own circumstances and his reaction to what the university is rightly doing in terms of inquiring as to how he was appointed in the first place.
Cambridge is your alma mater?
Yeah, I was at Cambridge. I think this incident hasn't reflected well on them. I suspect that, he was appointed by very well-meaning people, but they didn't clearly scrutinise, his record enough. Because he's had to resign, and now we've got this appalling tragedy. So I think Cambridge University has questions to answer, frankly.
We will discuss those further as the wrap continues. Susie, your initial thoughts on this?
My initial thoughts are that he's a father of 2 children, and he has a wife, and they're the people who matter the most, I think, on days like today. There are lots of people who are desperate. And we live in that era now. People are desperate to come out and say, well, I think it was this, and it was this one thing, and it was that one thing, it was this, it was these people, it was the journalists, it was the allegations, it was this. Are you all happy now? And I think it's too early for that. I think we don't know, as Kwasi was saying. Any one of a number of things could have happened this afternoon. But I think probably what's, the final analysis when things have had an inquest and people are able to give evidence and we know what's happened, the final analysis will include the fact that, as Kwasi said, this is a fairly quiet and non-public figure, in a way, who was elevated, who was amplified by academia and held up as an example when he doesn't appear to have really had the substantive base in order to sustain that. And I feel dreadfully sorry for him because he seems to have built himself a bit of a house of cards. That's been torn down one way or another, and he's obviously found himself in a situation where his lawyer was saying earlier on Sky News that he hasn't seen a way out of it, and I feel dreadfully sorry for him.
And actually, the tragedy of it is that he's not the first academic of whatever race who's inflated their CV, or I mean, he's done it perhaps to a degree that's surprising, but this sort of thing does happen. People claim things. People, even political people, have claimed things that they've done which hasn't stood scrutiny. But he became this football in a kind of culture war, if I can mix metaphors in that way. He became this kind of cause célèbre, kind of this figure where there was an intense, from the far right to what we might call the woke left, all of these people felt that they had to have a piece of him. And it was a firestorm, from here, the United States, all over the English-speaking world. He became this sort of figure where people who was contested. And I think, for understandable reasons, it may have proved too much for him.
More than that, he had a fascinating life story.
No, but we don't know how much of it was true. I mean...
Well, we don't, but that's...
that was the issue.
Kwasi. That's what caused the interest. That's what's led to the publishing of his book, at least in the States
but
so
we don't.
far.
But the fact is, we haven't scrutinised the claims that he's made. I mean, they were extraordinary claims. I mean, running 600 miles in 6 days, what it was. I'm not even talking about the academic side. Yeah. I'm talking about some, you know, he was a footballer, I've read, he's all sorts of things that he's claimed to have done. And you know, hand on heart, we just don't know what of it is true and what we can believe.
And whether any of it matters as well.
Well,
I mean, he obviously, he got some, in the end of his career, he got more important academic jobs as a result, and he would have earned better money as a result of that. But that appears to be because within those culture wars that you were talking about, the progressive left has held him up as some kind of exemplar, which he wasn't really able to fulfill. But you know, I think it's the case that the things that he said, whether they're right or wrong, and there'll probably be a blend of truth and fiction in there, is that it hasn't killed anybody. And I think what's happened is he's firstly been told for years, you are the perfect example for a certain group of people who you can now go and fight for, you know. And his PhD was about race and academia. It was terribly meaningful stuff. And then when it's collapsed around him, he suddenly feels he's let his people down. And that's why...
But the suspicion is that he's made stuff up, OK? And I don't think there's any excuse for that whatsoever. And we just have to find out whether he has or not.
We will discuss further in a moment. Joining us now to talk about this is the founder of Naked Politics, Banseka Kayembe. Banseka, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us here on The Wrap this evening. Your reaction to the news today that Jason Arday has been found dead?
Yeah, I think first of all, I just want to say, like, my deepest condolences to his family. This will be a really, really tragic moment for them during what's been a very distressing, I'm sure, couple of weeks. So I just want to give my condolences to them. This is incredibly sad. You know, the facts are still coming to light, as we know, but there's lots of things perhaps we don't know yet. But it does seem at the moment as though the media does have a hand to play potentially in this. You know, the Telegraph in particular ran, I think, a very rampant campaign, putting Jason Arday on, you know, the front page quite consistently, making this a real headline national story for reasons that perhaps don't really seem to potentially really quite stack up. It has been noted that this, the notice of Jason Arday's death has been relegated to kind of the lower down aspect of the Telegraph front page on their website, for example. So you can see the way in which they've, you know, really kind of not really highlighted his death, which potentially they may well have some kind of a hand or responsibility in. So it's really, really desperately sad. This is one of those situations that absolutely could have been avoided. And I think we have to ask serious questions as more facts come to light about the media, the mainstream media's hand in a lot of this.
But let me just come back on that, because the initial reporting was done by the Times Higher Education, which these days has nothing to do with the Times newspaper. By the way, and an investigation was done into his appointment and these allegations of plagiarism over a good 18 months. And Cambridge University employed expensive lawyers to try to close that investigation down. Now, you could argue if they hadn't done that and it had come out then and it was in an industry-specific publication like the THE, it might not have ballooned. And also, just to pick up on that, The Guardian has investigated, the Daily Mail has investigated, as well as the Telegraph and others as well. So it isn't just specific to the Telegraph, but others, and not just the mainstream media, the THE, have done their own investigating too.
Sure. And I'm not here to say that there was no merit in that investigation, by the way. I read the Guardian article about him, I think it was earlier this week, which did raise, I think, some important questions around his biography, some of his biographical details, some issues around plagiarism as well. And I'm not saying that this should have in no way been part of a broader debate. I think this could have been part of a really broader, important debate that we have about what is the purpose of these diversity initiatives that these kind of liberal-leaning, often like institutions like to implement, often as a way to make themselves feel better, like they're progressing and moving forward. We could have had a really good conversation about what the point of those diversity initiatives is and the ways in which those are actually failing often a lot of people, including a lot of black and brown people, actually. And instead what we got a very a long diatribe about how actually Jason Arday was now a symbol of the tables turning and that black and brown people were now benefiting in academia at the expense of white people, which is a dangerous right-wing conspiratorial idea And he became the face of that in a way that, in a manner that I just don't think is justifiable and I don't think is fair. Let's have conversation. Let's have open debate, absolutely, about what's going on in these institutions, about what's going on in academia. But let's make sure that that is fair, and let's not make one individual the poster child for that, which potentially could have ended up in some really devastating consequences.
Banseka Kayembe, appreciate you joining us this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's take a look back now at Professor Arday's career. And Jason Arday received his PhD from Liverpool John Moores University in 2015. Arday was a professor of sociology of education at Glasgow University from January 2022 to March 2023. Then from that March, at the age of 37, he became Cambridge University's youngest black professor and a fellow at Jesus College. Last month, the Daily Telegraph's initial publication into accusations of plagiarism against Jason Arday prompted scrutiny into his work, which Cambridge University initially defended as the victim of a vile campaign. Following allegations of plagiarism around his work, Arday resigned from his position on Wednesday, the 5th of August. Well, Professor Jason Arday spoke to Sky News back in 2023, just after he was appointed at Cambridge. He described his early years and his hopes for his academic career.
I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder when I was 3, so a hybrid of autism, Asperger's syndrome, and global development delay. And I guess it's been well kind of publicised now, but I didn't learn to speak until I was 11, and I didn't learn to read and write until I was 18. Most of my work has always been around really promoting and trying to emphasise the democratisation of education and the redistribution of resources to those most in need within our society. So it's really a continuation of that work and really providing a platform for black and ethnic minority and underrepresented academics within UK academia, with a particular focus on centering black women who make up a very, very small percentage of the professoriate. So there are many black female academics that are a lot more able, talented and gifted than I am, but the structures that remain in place secured them from being in a position of one, the professoriate, and 2, progressing through the academy. So it's really a continuation of the work I've been doing over the last 10 years and finding better mental health mechanisms for black and ethnic minority people and underrepresented people, generally speaking, within the intersect within the UK and global academy.
That was Jason Arday speaking in 2023 to us here at Sky News. Now, earlier we heard from Jolyon Morm, founder of the Good Law Project. Who knew Jason Arday?
What was the public interest in the continued hounding of Dr. Arday after he had ceased to resign? The continued stories run across the full political spectrum of our media after his resignation, in circumstances where his friends were publicly warning media outlets of how vulnerable he is very hard for me to understand. And I think that if the press had been a little bit more compassionate, Dr. Arday would still be in the bosom of his family today. And as you can hear, I am very, very distressed about it.
Let's bring Kwasi and Susie back in. Susie, what do you make of what we've heard from those guests of ours this evening?
I think I would agree fully with everything that Banseka said about some of the issues with DEI hires and how it can make things worse, not better, and how it's not always working. I would dispute what Jolyon's saying there. I think perhaps he's speaking a little bit from an emotional point of view.
Which is understandable.
Understandable.
He's been speaking to
his client regularly, and Jason's been telling him that he doesn't feel that he can carry on and all the rest of it. But journalists get told someone shouldn't be in your newspaper, shouldn't be reported on because they have a mental health issue about 5 times a day. And it's done by lawyers like Jolyon, not him specifically, but people in that position who are representing someone who's at the centre of a storm. It happened with Rolf Harris when he was under suspicion for child sex offences. Huge warnings go out across the media. If you do this, you'll be responsible for someone's death. Their mental health is too bad. And unfortunately, many times it's going to be accurate, and many more times it's going to be a tactic and a ploy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, lawyers use it so often that it becomes a case of the boy who cried wolf. And then someone says it about this particular case, and I'm sure there will have been discussions in newspapers going, how good is this? Is it accurate? What do we think? How do we make the judgment? And a lot of people may have decided that, well, it's just one of those.
But I think Julian had a point. I don't often agree with Julian Moore. I don't think, I've got my own views about what he's doing. But the point he made about the fact he'd resigned, and because of the whole cultural war situation that we're in, he became a kind of cause célèbre. And even after he'd resigned, he said, look, I've resigned, I've left my position. He did continue to be this sort of culture war football, for want of a better phrase. And I think that clearly has led to whatever's happened today.
Yeah. But didn't it carry on because, as you said earlier, Cambridge still has a lot of questions
they do.
to answer
They do.
about this? And it was them instructing, we think, the lawyers Carter Ruck, who wrote that letter in the first place to try and stop the investigation.
But you know how we happen to be in the middle of August, so Parliament isn't sitting. Obviously, we've got these wildfires, but the news pace is slightly slower than when politics is in full flow. And I think this was a situation where it was an interesting story. It was a bit of a scandal. It was a scandal. And the story ran and ran longer, I think, than would have been the case if we'd had more political news.
Yeah,
put it that way.
Absolutely. If this story had been breaking, I mean, his book was due to be published in this country at the end of this month.
Yes.
If his book was due to be published at the end of September, in the middle of political conference season, I doubt that it would have had quite the same splash that it was.
And I think
you had a media hoopla in the summer, which happens habitually, and there's obviously been plenty of meat on the bones for journalists to chew on, which hasn't helped.
And we saw clips of him. I mean, he's someone who seemed quite shy, and he's not perhaps a natural exhibitionist.
Well, described by his family.
That's right, a gentle person.
Gentle man.
And then all of a sudden, you're in the middle of this. You're the centre of a huge culture war battle fought on social media across different continents. I mean, it must have been very, very scary.
I think when you've had the resignation and he stepped back, and there may have been that opportunity that Jolyon was talking about there for everyone to go, well, we don't need to go quite so mad on this now. Then comes in the social media, the armchair detectives who go back and they find something that he wrote or that he said 1,000 years ago and say, aha, and I found another lie, and it gets amplified, and that in itself then drives more media coverage.
There may have been plenty of people thinking he was a victim of overpromotion, a victim.
I think he was.
Racist allegations from other academics.
But that also drives more media coverage because it feeds the outrage farm. You're outraged about something, and therefore it generates more interest. Therefore, newspaper editors keep sticking it on the front page. But it's interesting what Banseka said about how the Telegraph have played it down a little bit today. Their front page today, which has had pictures of Jason Arday consistently, that picture of him in his mortarboard and his robes, and he's dead today. And he's not on the front page.
Well, listen, this may have been too early for that. But the Times...
But they've got the story, but they had
to quickly... I don't know how the composites work.
They had the picture on file. They could have just whacked it in.
The Times does, in fact, lead on the death of Cambridge professor Jason Arday, who'd faced those accusations of plagiarism. We're going to turn to another news story tonight now. The government has sent out emergency alerts to people in England and Wales. I'm sure you heard them. Some of them even went out live here on Sky News, warning us of the dangers of sparking a fire as the fifth heat wave this year continues. The Prime Minister described the UK as a tinderbox, and he's appointed Baroness Blake as a fire minister to cope with the heat wave emergency. Shaman Freeman-Powell has more on this.
The aftermath of an inferno that forced hundreds to flee their homes. First, it ripped through land before rapidly engulfing houses. The sheer speed of the spread was what shocked residents the most, leaving them little time to react.
It was about 3:15 when they told us. They think the wind is changing, and so the fire service have said we've got to evacuate, and it was literally just please come as you are. You have a few minutes.
Some residents may never return to the place they called home.
The fire spread rapidly and has affected 38 domestic properties. Of these, sadly, 19 have been fully destroyed and a further 18 have sustained damage. The incident covered an area of approximately 500 acres.
Bone-dry conditions also encourage other fires to rage throughout the region. 10 separate incidents in the West Midlands led to 54 people needing treatment, whilst 19 others were taken to hospital.
I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I dealt with wildfires in Greater Manchester, but nothing on this scale. I've never seen scenes like this in Britain, where you just see a whole house gutted, smouldering. Please, everybody, take the greatest of care. In fact, don't light anything in an outdoor space right now. Britain is a tinderbox right now.
The challenge for the West Midlands Fire Service was unprecedented. They were inundated with more than 1,000 calls, and out of 6 casualties here in Stourbridge, half of them were firefighters. The damage and devastation extends beyond Stourbridge. Farmers use their own kit to keep flames at bay in Hertfordshire. But residents in Birmingham weren't afforded the luxury of time to prepare.
My brother managed to get the dog out and my mum's important things. And then it just engulfed everything. And it's a block of 6 houses together and it just ripped through them all. Everybody's lost so much. I mean, there's absolutely nothing left in anybody's houses. It's all gone, just gone.
Described as unprecedented, the fire in Stourbridge is now under control. But the hot weather conditions that caused this chaos could be our new normal. And measures to manage the way we deal with extreme heat in future are already underway. Siobhan Freeman-Powell, Sky News, Stourbridge.
Well, at around 7 o'clock tonight, I'm sure that triggers you. You probably heard it yourself. That alarm went out, sent to many of us on our mobiles around the country with an accompanying message. Our People and Politics correspondent, Nick Martin, is with us now. I think I got it twice, Nick, and I think poor old Jonathan Samuels had it go on when he was sat here on Sky News, but that's just the nature of the beast. It seems like there's been a bit of a step change in the way the government is trying to tackle the risk of wildfires.
Well, this test tonight was unprecedented. It's the first time we've had a national test for real across England and Wales. We've had regional tests, about 8 of them, and we've had 2 national tests. We had 8 regional alerts, but 2 national tests. But this is the first time it's been done to actually properly warn people. And it's a piercing siren that would have had millions of people looking at their phones thinking, what on earth is going on? Only then to read that it was about wildfires and the government's message not to set fires and fireworks and things like that. And we know that the Prime Minister has chaired a meeting of COBRA earlier in the week where they were looking at the wildfires across the country, and we know that he visited Stourbridge today to discuss with the residents there what's happened to their homes. And so it's really keen in his mind what the problem is. It is the driest July on record, and the country is bone dry, and even the slightest spark will cause huge problems. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister will meet farmers to say the government are going to give you another £65 million to try and manage droughts, to feed cattle, things like that. But remember, farmers are a sceptical audience when it comes to the government.
Yeah.
The last government made a lot of enemies in the farming world with the farming inheritance tax. So Andy Burnham, whilst he's got an eye on the immediate problem, might also have one eye on building bridges with the farming community to say, look, we're on your side. And so it'll be interesting to see how he's received tomorrow. His message tomorrow will be, I understand your worry.
Yes, well, they will be worried, but I think I'm right in saying the government now does have a minister responsible for food security as well, which is the bigger picture when it comes to this climate threat.
An early harvest is generally a bad harvest. Bad harvests often lead to increases in food prices, which is going to make the cost of living crisis worse. One of the big pillars of Andy Burnham's administration is, I'm going to ease the pain with the cost of living crisis. So it's in his interests to try and help farmers get the measures that they need to have decent crops. Probably too late, though. I mean, you go into the countryside like where I live and it's just like straw everywhere.
Yes.
You know, where are we going to get our Weetabix from come September? You know, it's going to be a lot more expensive. So it'll be interesting, as I say, to see how farmers react to Andy Burnham. New Prime Minister promising new things.
Yeah, other breakfast cereals, well, you hope, are available. They may run out as well. Susie, on this, what do you make of the government resorting to this alert? Look, as Nick was alluding to there, we'd heard the Prime Minister talking about the risks of things like those disposable barbecues and urging, some shops not to sell them, and they complied. And it's a sad truth that the majority of these wildfires are caused by human activity, whether it be a car on fire at the New Forest or someone, tossing a cigarette. Do you think it's the right approach?
Well, I think last time I was on here about a couple of weeks ago, I said we need to ban barbecues and bonfires for the rest of the summer. And
all barbecues?
Yeah, because
they're talking about the disposable ones.
They are.
No, but
you would ban all of them.
If you're lighting a fire in your garden, you are a twit, you are a moron, and you are going to potentially be causing all kinds of problems, because it doesn't take much for a barbecue to...
So you'd ban, gas ones as well?
All barbecues. Don't light a fire. Listen to the Prime Minister, Kwasi. Don't light a fire outside.
Disposable
doesn't matter.
Barbecues, not...
Don't light a fire. Just don't light a fire. Don't have a bonfire, don't have a barbecue, don't decide you need to get rid of a pile of rubbish. Don't light any fires, whatever they are. But I think I said about a fortnight ago, I'm glad the Prime Minister's finally picked up on it. Well done, Andy. You could have listened to me a bit sooner. We might not have had the last lot of wildfires. But what he really needs, all these new ministers, a fire minister, a minister for food security, you need a minister for climate change to do all of this.
They've got a whole department. They've got a whole department for net zero.
No, they've got a department of net zero. That's different. You need a minister to handle climate change, to help farmers become resilient, to have the right strains of crops to sow at the right times, to have better long-term forecasts, to change their land management, to deal with massive amounts of floodwaters and massive dry summers. You need to teach people how we can do... What do you do if you see a fire suddenly catch light in a field? Do you know what to do? I've got no idea what to do. So how do you tackle it? How do you
I've seen this before. I remember when we had the Syrian refugee crisis in 2015, we appointed a minister, I think it was Richard Harrington, who was going to be the Syrian migrant minister. And all of this is very performative. So obviously some things in the headlines. And Andy Burnham, to his credit, is quite good at that, making headlines and making it seem that he's doing something. But just announcing a minister for this and a minister for that, the House isn't even sitting, so there's no scrutiny on these ministers. I think it's just pure performative, purely performative. And the problem he'll have is that if nothing changes and nothing is delivered, he's done what he's done across a number of things now. He's set expectations very high, and if he doesn't deliver, I'm afraid things are going to go south pretty quickly.
That is the bigger picture we'll probably get to when they are sitting again in the forthcoming budget and everything else. In the meantime, you don't think it's performative talking about the risk of fires?
No, but I have seen governments say, oh, we're going to have a minister for fires, we're going to have a minister for Syrian migrants, we're going to have a minister... And yes, it can build some confidence, but a lot of it...
But a minister for climate change is a slightly bigger problem.
I would say there's a whole department. We used to have a climate change committee. I think that still sits. Which is a sort of cabinet-level committee. We've got a whole department of energy and net zero, DESNES it's called, and they will be ministers there who will be focusing on this. And you could certainly say, OK, you, Minister for Energy, you're also Minister for Energy and Climate Change. We've had that in the past. So I'm a bit sceptical when new prime ministers, especially when they come in freshly, from having done another job, say we're going to have a minister for this and a minister for that.
Where were you when you got the alert? Because I know you said to us you were surprised I had your phone number, but you know how it works.
I was teasing. Of course I was.
Okay.
I mean, when we were in government, we did have regional ones. I mean, you said that it's the first national one. I'm pretty sure we had regional alerts. I remember an alert about flooding in around my constituency and other areas, and I was on the way, I think, here when I got the alert.
Did it catch you by surprise?
I think there's a legitimate question as to whether this alert on this subject is appropriate.
Yes.
The original alerts were meant to be the modern-day air raid siren for if the nation is facing an attack.
That's right.
And that's how it was billed, in the modern world, especially after the invasion of Ukraine. This is what brought this system back out the cupboard.
Yes.
That's why we saw 2 tests a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
A lot of people would have heard that alarm in the corner of their room tonight and wondered what on earth is going on before they'd grabbed their reading glasses and managed to read it.
Susie and I were both driving. When you're driving an alarm going off, Well, it's alarm.
It was a bit much, yeah. Luckily, my phone was attached to the car, so I was able to play the message and hear it. I was driving along, so I figured out what it was. Although it was telling me to ring 999 if there was a problem, which is just one of those things.
And if you use it for wildfires, and then you use it for a flood, and then you use it for whatever, when, God forbid, you actually need to use the system, we might become immune to it. It's a view that the bar needs to be very high for this kind of alert.
I think you're right. I mean, we talked in another context about crying wolf, but you can't have these things every week or even every month.
I think you could have achieved the same thing if you'd had the Prime Minister or a minister address the nation and say, this is a situation.
No, I agree.
We are not asking you nicely to not have barbecues. We are banning barbecues. We're going to fine you if there's a barbecue or whatever. And do this, that and the other. We all need to be careful. And for goodness sake, stop having baths. And, you know, we'd all
You're going to ban baths as well as barbecues?
No, just stop having them, Kwasi. You can have a shower instead.
Mind you, if you haven't got the smoke of a barbecue, you probably need less baths as a result. Nick, thank you so much. Fewer baths, thank you. Or less of a bath.
This is the nanny state gone completely bonkers.
No, it's grammar.
It's grammatical. Susie was absolutely right. I got the grammar wrong. Nick, thank you very much indeed to you. Next, rail bosses have said they will monitor the temperature of rail tracks during this latest heat wave after 2 trains derailed within 24 hours. The first in East Sussex. In fact, my local station, Lewis, left 2 people seriously injured. And this afternoon, another came off the tracks in Essex. Molly Malone has this.
A second train derailing in as many days, this time in Essex, with 45 people on board. There are no reported significant injuries, but this incident will raise fresh questions about the safety of our railways. And that's because it comes only hours after this. In Lewis, in East Sussex, an 8-carriage train, with 3 of them on their side and off the track. A journey from London to Eastbourne somehow derailing on the hottest day of the year. For those on board, a terrifying experience.
It just came to a sudden stop and it kind of rocked everyone back. And I think that was when it started going like a seesaw. And I mean, it felt like we were in a carnival ride, some kind of perverse, sadistic carnival ride. And then it flipped, and I just remember holding on to this table, just like thinking that I'm like holding on to my life. There was a woman who was crouched over her child, just sobbing, blood dripping from her mouth, just incredibly traumatized. And
this was a train on a regular route in the middle of the afternoon. There were 150 people on board, including children. 20 people went to hospital, 2 of them with serious injuries.
This was quickly declared a major incident, and an incident which required a huge response from emergency services. It will now be for investigators to establish exactly what happened.
As part of that investigation, there are questions about whether the extreme heat could have affected the railway's infrastructure.
Everything on the railway has a sort of temperature range in which it's designed to work in. Now, if you start going beyond that temperature range, in the case of track, rails will expand beyond the point they're stressed to. There is a question that will be being asked, which is whether over time we need to adjust the operating temperature window to cope with higher temperatures. But I suspect in reality, it is probably a little bit early to say.
In a statement, Network Rail said they appreciate the public will be concerned at the news of 2 derailments of passenger trains over a short period of time. But I want to reassure them that Britain's railways still rank among the safest in the world. They go on to say the unprecedented hot and dry weather that we have experienced this summer has presented exceptional challenges to the railway. In response, we've taken several additional proactive steps to manage and mitigate the impact. An attempt to reassure, as authorities say that these incidents are rare. They are, though, enough to cause fear, panic and disruption too. Amid boiling hot temperatures, people wait for answers. Molly Malone, Sky News in Lewis.
Kwasi Kwarteng and Susie Boniface are still with me now. So, look, it's one of those stories where I have a bit of a vested interest because, as I said, Lewis is my local train station. I went over that piece of track the night before, and anecdotally, locally, people know the train always wobbles there. and there have been complaints about it, and someone on the train before heard a big bang and thought that's a bit strange and alerted the driver. And here we are, it derailed, and another one subsequently.
So look, I mean, there's a specific case which must have been terrifying for the people on the train. And we had another case, I think, in Essex within 24 hours.
There you go.
So clearly it's related to the heat. It must be related to that. And the
investigation will find out exactly.
That's right. But the broader point is we have a country that is not adapted, is not used to these temperatures. And over the next few years, one of the jobs of the government will be to try and make sure that our infrastructure is better adapted to what's.
But Kwasi, maybe we don't have a country that's adapted to the increasing temperatures.
No.
Do we have a country that has just not invested anywhere near enough over decades in the infrastructure like our railways?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say we could have invested more in the critical infrastructure
because Network Rail is chasing its tail, trying to look after the tracks.
And a lot of the and that's where I think the government can actually pull levers because a lot of the infrastructure is under private ownership. So
the railway tracks aren't.
No, not the railway tracks, but the rolling stock is, and you've got the rolling stock. You've got to adapt. Has got to adapt to the rails, the trains.
Southern Rail, which was that train that derailed in Lewes, is now.
Yeah, a lot of them have been under public ownership, but some of them aren't. That was the point. And historically,
they haven't if you had a climate change minister, which I'm going to bang on about.
No, don't bang on about it, because they wouldn't do anything. I mean, the problem is...
Can I finish the point? If you have a climate change minister, it's the kind of thing that you can oversee making rails, if that is the fundamental cause of this, if the heat has been something to do with the collisions, with the derailments, which we don't know, but if that is to do with it, they can find some way to help and encourage that resilience within the system. We need resilience within our water networks because you've had wildfires with fire engines who don't have water at high enough pressure to properly fight the fire because of the system.
So it sounds like a wonderful idea. The reality of when you put up the government together, the climate change minister will be number 25. In the government list, and won't actually be able to... No, I get it. I mean, sorry to
I know you get it, but
puncture your balloon,
I also want...
That isn't going to shift the dial on this.
I want to get away from the likely bureaucracy of all this.
Bureaucracy is important. I mean, it is. I'm afraid.
It is, and you've talked about it plenty, and I want to bring it back to the here and now, because, as you say, as we pointed out, 2 derailments in 24 hours is going to impact people's trust in the railways, which is going to drive people back onto the roads. And if they're driving petrol and diesel fueled vehicles, they're going to contribute potentially to climate change. They need to be back on the rails, don't they? More people need to have confidence in the railways. And what's this going to do for that, Susie?
We need to have an integrated transport system that is better for the environment. It doesn't necessarily have to be trains. We could have hydrogen-powered buses somewhere other than just in London and Manchester, and people could actually get around rural networks without having to hop on a train to do it. You could have smaller buses rather than great big thirsty diesel.
They need to be air-conditioned, though, otherwise the bus drivers will go on strike.
Exactly. But there are lots of things that need to be done, and I do think this is going to, impact people's trust in the train network, although it is very, very safe as compared to the rest of the world, as we've heard from some of the...
It is very safe, and it's become very safe in the last 30 years.
Like this,
I mean, you'll say that's bureaucratic, but it isn't. It's actually delivering.
There are passengers who know that, for example, there's a wobbly spot, and we know that that's not great, or that bit of embankment always has a landslip in the winter, whatever it may be, which happens a lot on the Lewis line. You have... you need to have that encouragement and that in sort of support for the network. But there's huge amounts of public subsidy go to rail travel, which mostly is used by more middle-class people who are commuting to work. And you don't get a huge bang for your buck in terms of the taxpayer subsidy. In terms
so we get a lot,
but
just on that particular point, it's important for viewers to know, a lot less money, and it's less, not fewer, a lot less money is put from the public purse than in most of Europe. I mean, if you travel in Europe, the actual cost of the ticket
I'm talking about the office, on the subsidy,
at the ticket office is a lot lower. That's because they put a lot more...
If you subsidise buses more, and I'm not sucking up to Andy Burnham, I promise, but if you subsidise buses more, you actually get a greater return economically on the subsidy than you do subsidising.
Even though,
trains.
and that's why, actually, relative to.
But then you have that problem
tickets
with
are
fossil
expensive.
fuels, and how do the buses get around compared to how the trains get around?
Well,
and how many trains are diesel anyway?
Well, I think it's around 30% has been electrified, and there you go. That's where the investment needs to be. I don't mind bureaucracy.
No, we won't talk about it. We won't talk about it. We won't talk about actually how government works and any of that. That's just boring. Yeah.
It's not sitting anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. Let's take a look at the front pages now. And the Times has tonight's breaking news: the death of former Cambridge professor Jason Arday, who was facing accusations of plagiarism. The Financial Times quotes the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, describing Britain as a tinderbox during dangerous drought conditions. The Eye leads with a nationwide ban on disposable barbecues aimed at stopping the further spread of wildfires. That is also the main story for tomorrow's Sun. The Star has news of the second train derailment we were just discussing in as many days, this time in Essex. Turning to politics, the Mirror reacts to Nigel Farage's re-election in Clacton and the immediate reopening of the parliamentary investigation into his alleged financial dealings, with the headline "Back Where We Started." The Reform leader has spoken to the Daily Express, insisting we are only getting started. The Telegraph hears that men over 50 will no longer automatically be tested for prostate cancer. GPs will now decide on a case-by-case basis, which, if you're over 50, Kwasi, like you and I both are...
Yes, we are.
It's something to consider. I think I just
serious.
squeaked in there with a test, each to their own, of course. Let's start with the Times, and they lead, not just focus on, but they do lead with the news that has broken this evening, if you're just joining us, that Professor Jason Arday, who was that academic accused of plagiarism, has been found dead this afternoon. Susie, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, the Times has done absolutely the right thing, this front page, especially when compared to the Telegraph, which has sort of produced it as a very small story. But they've gone on the big story of the day. I mean, if what Jason Arday did in his career was worthy of front page news, then certainly the fact that he's been found dead after several weeks of media firestorm is also worthy of front page news. And they've treated it with the importance that it deserves. And a picture lower down of Emmanuel Macron on holiday, and that's caused some concerns in France because there's got wildfire problems, whereas the Telegraph's kind of done the other way around. They've got a picture of Emmanuel Macron and minimised the story of Arday.
It's their second story on the Telegraph front page.
That is you know, below the fold, as it's known in journalism, which just means it's just less likely to be seen, less likely to be noticed.
What do you make, Kwasi, and if we move on to the Telegraph, of the prominence, or Susie says lack of that story on their front page?
I mean, clearly they took a decision. I mean, they were very prominent in saying, well, exposing, if that's the right word, the plagiarism and shining a light on what Arday had claimed. And now he's dead, been found dead. You could say they're trying to minimise the story. I don't think that. I mean, it's on the front page. If they were minimising it, they wouldn't have put it on the front page. They'd have put it, you know, further in the newspaper. So I don't really see a conspiracy here.
Well, the question is whether, if they'd had a story about Jason Arday having done something else wrong, whether that would have been given more.
I'm not sure. I mean, they've kind of done that story.
I just think, as a journalist, the front pages of the two, and considering that the editors of both used to work together at the Daily Mail when I was just a Joe Schmo reporter at the Mail, that the Times has produced a better result than the Telegraph has.
But Joe Schmo, who knew her.
I think the picture in the Telegraph of Macron is better.
It's the same picture.
I know, but it's nice. It fits on the front page.
It's been more cropped. Fits on the page.
It's cropped and it's smaller. It's pretty much the same picture.
It is the same picture by the same agency.
He does
the same man doing the same thing.
He loves blue sunglasses. We haven't got The Guardian yet. It'd be interesting to see how they deal with the Jason Arday story and where you'd imagine they put it on their front page and where they would. Let's move on to talk about the heat, Kwasi. And the FT weekend, their headline, the PM warns Britain is a tinderbox. Wildfire numbers top record, disposable barbecue ban, EV targets, fuel climate fears.
So look,
what do you make of this?
I think the Prime Minister, and I'm going to get quite political on this, I mean, he's clearly good at making announcements and giving the impression that he's sorting things out and he's appointed ministers. He's only been Prime Minister, what, 3 weeks? Not even 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So he's quite good. And the tinderbox, that's a good line. You know, Britain is a tinderbox.
It feels like it, doesn't it?
I know, and Starmer wouldn't have put it that way. He's put it in a pithy way. I think, as I've said before, he's building up expectations. He's the new sheriff in town. And all of this will be under massive scrutiny when the House comes back in September and we have the conference season.
What's there to scrutinise about him saying that Britain is a tinderbox?
No, that's a good phrase. But you know, he's seeing farmers tomorrow, and I'm assuming he's going to promise them some money to deal with the situation.
Yeah.
But that's on top of all
Martin say it's going to
65 million, something like that. And that's on top of all the other commitments he's made. And he's clearly good at making announcements and pledging to spend money. How the money is raised is another question, and I think that'll be scrutinised and he'll be under more pressure.
I mean, having been in the hot seat of Chancellor yourself, and that's the next big, of course, Parliament coming back after the summer recess, but also the forthcoming budget. Don't you think they'll be working this out behind the scenes as we
Of course
speak?
they will, but you've still got to raise the money. I mean, it's painful. You know that you have to do it. But, you know, I've read reports, 25 billion, 30 billion, on top of the 100 billion that they did, or rather the 40 billion in the first year in power, the 26 billion last year, to raise another 30 billion. That's 100 billion in tax raises in just over 2 years. That's going to have a political impact.
The Sun has a close focus on this with a ban on Barbies, barbecues, that is, which I know, Susie, will make you happy, although
You're happy about
I have to say, it is disposable.
Disposable, yeah. I will quote the Prime Minister at you, ladies and gentlemen.
What did he say?
Britain has a tinderbox right now. Setting a fire in any outdoor setting of any kind is a risk to other people's homes. It's a risk to other people's lives. Don't do it. Any barbecue. You can't have a barbecue safely outside because it's a flame. It's as simple as that. Why would you do it? It's literally next to your own house, and most of us, our houses, most of them have some wood in them. And the rafters, the beams, the things inside. Heck, what would you grab? I was listening to a lady on the who had to leave those fires in, I think it was Stourbridge, overnight this morning. And she said they had about 5 minutes. They grabbed the cat food, the cat basket,
but that wasn't caused by a barbecue.
That was about it. That was caused by... I'm not saying about a barbecue. I'm saying...
You said you would ban them.
Yes, I'm just getting to the end of my point, if you let me finish it, which is that what would you take if you had 5 minutes? And I looked round my house and thought, well, I need all of that, I need all of that, I need that. And no, right, OK, start again. You can't do it. If there's a fire coming to your house and you've got 5 minutes, how are you going to get out? How are your children going to get out? How are your pets going to get out?
I'm not questioning. It's a really bad situation to be in.
If you're having a barbecue in your garden, it's next to that place that you really don't want to burn down, Kwasi. That's the fundamental problem with it. If you're having a barbecue in someone else's garden, it's their house going to burn down, isn't it? But it's your barbecue in your garden, your house. Don't be stupid.
Why do you think he hasn't banned it then? Why do you think he's just banning the disposable?
Can he ban it? Can he ban it?
Right now? Well, he can ban disposable ones. He could just say we shouldn't have barbecues.
COVID showed us that a Prime Minister can just issue an instruction and it should be law.
And why wouldn't he do that? I mean, why wouldn't he go the full hog, as you've described, and say, actually, no more barbecues?
Well, can he unilaterally legislate to ban barbecues?
Well, he's going to ban disposable ones. I don't see why he can't ban barbecues. But the reason is that it would be incredibly unpopular. People feel that they're responsible, they can control fires in their
I don't
garden.
think it would be unpopular. I think it would be absolutely on the money.
Well, let's leave the barbecues there. I'm going to douse them both in terms of the discussion, because I want to finish off, Kwasi, with the Daily Mirror's front page, back where we started. The moment Nigel Farage... He wasn't there for the announcement. Nigel Farage wins Clacton again, and the morning after the investigation resumes into the £5 million, in inverted commas, on the Mirror gift from the billionaire.
So one thing I would say is that Nigel has invested in a company a public company, which I'm executive chairman, which buys Bitcoin. So I need to just get that out there, because people will start saying, oh, you know, you're in business with him, which is true. He's invested in my company. Having said that, I'm a conservative. I don't support reform. And I think, I wouldn't say it's backfired, but I don't think he'd gamed the situation where the other parties weren't going to contest the by-election. Having said all of that, he won with 62%. Count Binface got whatever, 27%. And if there is another by-election, a lot of people, I think, in Clacton were saying, why are we doing this?
Where at it? Is Christopher Harborne invested in this company?
No, he hasn't.
OK, just checking.
No, just
interested.
No, I would have said that.
That's the fundamental problem. Although this particular instance, Farage has increased his majority, has increased his actual physical vote.
So has Count Binface increased his vote
by 10,000%, it must be said.
Count Binface isn't going to win the next by-election.
No, he's not.
But he's, you know, Farage, the score was pretty good for Farage. I was expecting him probably to have a lower mandate because of the lower turnout. He's got a good turnout. The problem is that he hasn't stopped. He's got the support of the people of Clacton on the basis of some allegations which have not been proven and which most people in Clacton, because there isn't deep enough media coverage of these things in that area, it just don't know an awful lot about. And if he does have to go back to them...
So they may do and may have chosen...
They may and they may not. But the fact is they've only got accusations.
If they have to do another by-election in the next 3 months, he will increase his majority.
Well, OK, we'll get back to that, because if the parliamentary commissioner produces his result,
10 seconds.
that will then be fact, not allegation. And you'll have a second one which people don't want to come out for a second time. I think fallout will drop.
Hold that thought. Thank you both very much indeed for the time.
Well, then his mandate reduces.
We're going to have to take a brief recess. It is the summer, after all. We will be back with much more from Kwasi, Susie and me after the break at 11 o'clock. Don't go away.